Coming back to our previous story, President Donald Trump's new national security blueprint states the era of mass migration is over and highlights China as a long-term competitor to the United States. Joining me now to discuss is Kervin Aucoin, former lead intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance coordinator for the U.S. Army. Kervin, welcome. It is good to have you back after that. What, in your view, has been the impact of mass migration on the United States in recent years?
Yeah, sorry about that, Chris, and it's so good to see you. Good to be
All
here.
good.
I would I would say that it hasn't been the last few years. It's been the last few decades. This has been an issue within the United States. Just the freedom of travel across borders, mainly the border, our southern border with Mexico. So my first deployment, if I could just tell a brief story here, my first deployment was to Baghdad, Iraq in 2004. One of the first briefings we got out of Fort Hood, Texas was from the FBI talking about the mass migration of terrorist cells through the Mexican border. That was an issue in 2004. That has not gotten fixed. I honestly, there's a lot you can disagree with the administration, and I think that's healthy to disagree with any administration that is doing the wrong thing. But we have got to secure the border for these specific reasons.
Okay, and Kervin, the strategy goes beyond the United States and hints at the need for other nations to follow suit in ending mass migration. What do you think are the biggest obstacles to Trump's apparent aim of ending mass migration worldwide?
Yeah, I think it's the worldwide part of that, right? Well, while the Trump administration is talking America first and being, very internal about things, trying to project power with that, it's going to be quite difficult. The European nations are going to wonder why they are going to agree to things that the United States wants them to do, and the United States isn't going or says that they're not going to help within Europe anymore. But I think one of the things there is what the Trump administration is trying to do and forcing NATO as a NATO country, forcing other NATO countries to spend that 5% of GDP on defense. I know Germany is working towards that. Other countries are working towards that, but most of NATO is woefully unprepared for what's happening in their borders. And one of the things is that Russia is creeping closer to NATO borders with this war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and we are seeing rising public sentiment in Europe about more secure borders, about pushing back against mass migration there. But the recently released document states we want to ensure that the Western Hemisphere remains reasonably stable and well governed enough to prevent and discourage mass migration to the United States. Does this explain the U.S. Navy buildup in the Caribbean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Monroe Doctrine 2.0, right? So this is exactly what's happening in the Caribbean. There, it is a show of force, really. Go back to reading The Art of War. You want to win this battle without ever firing a single munition. Well, we fired quite a few munitions, but have not had many fired back at us in this. And I think that's the projection of power that's being shown here. And it starts with Venezuela, it moves to Colombia, and it shows the Latin American countries that the United States is not going to sit idly by while terrorist organizations, while drug traffickers are able to move at will. And another part of this is, look, China is in Latin America as well, and they have a free flow of movement in Latin America, facilitating this drug movement, specifically fentanyl, into the United States.
Now, my colleague Blanquita Cullum, who used to be on the board of governors for U.S. foreign media in the United States, said that when she was in Venezuela reporting on Chavez, she saw billboards sponsored by the Iranian regime there. What kind of presence do America's adversaries have in South America that could be perhaps deterred by this presence?
Yeah, absolutely right. So we've got it's just like the Axis and the Allies again, right? So Iran is heavy in Latin America. China has a heavy influence in Latin America through their Belt and Road Initiative. Russia is supplying munitions, not as much anymore with their war in Ukraine, but they are providing energy They're providing intelligence. And so you've got this axis, right, that we're always talking about: Russia, Iran, China, and they are very influential in the Caribbean. Let's not forget that the Panama Canal, both sides of that port, have ports that are owned by Chinese companies, with the golden percent that's owned by the Chinese Communist Party of the CCP. If China would direct those companies to block the Panama Canal, they would do so, and the United States would have a very difficult time traversing this free flow of naval waters.
Kervin, you've created the perfect segue to my next question. A key focus of this national security strategy is China, stating America's economic openness toward China did not influence it toward freedom and neighborliness as the policy had intended. What went wrong?
I'm sorry. Again, what? I guess I don't understand the question of what went
Oh, it's
wrong.
okay. So, what went wrong in the past 30, 40 years with U.S. policy towards China, hoping that trade would influence China toward neighborliness?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely right. So what went wrong? Let me throw that back onto China. I'll tell you what went wrong: the theft of U.S. intelligence, the theft of naval assets, so that they can build their own naval assets. Not this free flow of information. No, their aircraft carriers are built as a direct replica of U.S. air carriers because of the engine that was stolen. So China owns the responsibility there. They have not been good stewards of world freedom, and now they're with all of this influx in cash flow in this in the world today. They are trying to prop themselves up as some benevolent global power, which they aren't. They are thieves. The Belt and Road Initiative has showed us that with emerging economies, they are stealing from the rest of the world, namely the African continent and the resources there. They are not providing for the African continent, they're just stealing resources.
Kervin, Trump's China policy is heavily focused on economic reciprocity, seeming to take a sort of live and let live stance, calling China a competitor. But China, of course, seeks overall dominance over the US and the world. What do you make of the tension between these differing positions?
Yeah, it's actually in parallel with what I've seen in the U.S. military and in my time in the Department of War. What I'm saying is that as I started out, I signed up September or October 16th of 2001. China was seen as a competitor. 10 years into that, they were seen as an adversary. That then became a near peer, and as we stand today, that the U.S. and the U.S. military determines that China is a peer on peer, right? So if we get into a large scale combat operation, we are dealing with another peer. This is something that we have not faced, since Nazi Germany, right? Not to say one side's Nazis, one side's the free
Yep.
world, but we are in a war that no one has participated in, and we are losing our grandparents and our great grandparents who have fought in those wars to even understand how to win that.
Kervin, just in closing here, overall, how does this national security strategy compare to the same from prior administrations?
I think it's a lot more political for sure, but we know that's how the administration works right now. A heavy emphasis on our borders and staying internal, the America First policy, but heavy-handed towards China, I think. And look, I think there is. I know a lot of the media is running with how Russia is not really mentioned in here. I read through it. You know what Russia is mentioned as? Not even a competitor. Russia is an afterthought because they showed their hand in the invasion of Ukraine, right? They used to be seen as a near peer to the United States. The United States does not consider them a near peer anymore. And they say, Europe, deal with it. This is on your borders. This is on your continent. You need to deal with it.
Kervin Aucoin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Stay safe out there.
You too.